Thank you. Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have photographer and SVA alum Brian Finke as tonight's guest speaker. Originally from Texas, Brian is currently based in New York, where he is represented by Clamp Art Gallery. To date, he has published 4 amazing monographs: 2468 American Cheerleaders and Football Players, Umbrage; Flight Attendants Powerhouse Books, Construction Decode Books, and most recently, U.S. Marshals, also from Powerhouse. Among others, his work is in the permanent collections of the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, Worcester Art Museum, St. Louis Art Museum, Akron Art Museum, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Kyosato Museum of Photographic Arts, and the Alexia Foundation for World Peace. So please help me give Brian a warm welcome to our lecture series.
Thanks, man.
Welcome.
Thanks. Hello, I'm Brian. I'm a photographer. Yeah, it's great coming back. I went to SVA and love the opportunity to come back and share stories. I shoot for magazines all the time. I've published books, do gallery exhibitions, and I brought pictures from a few different series here along with some work stuff, and I'll just kind of like start showing this and ramble off and tell you guys a bunch of stories and kind of like what it's like working after art school and all that good stuff. So this was the first project that I worked on that became my first book. I started this after SVA. I'm from Texas. My sisters were cheerleaders. I was like the newspaper yearbook photographer. And it kind of felt like full circle coming back and like being on the football field again. How I originally started this project was I saw the movie Bring It On. I know we've all seen it. Amazing film. I saw it, and afterwards I was like, I need to go to these cheerleading competitions. My sisters were cheerleaders in high school. They had been to these big competitions. I was like, I still want to go and photograph this and check it out. So I originally started going and would just get in the car and like drive down to Florida, Daytona, Orlando, and this is also the time where I started working for magazines. And I would like call photo editors or, well, email people and tell them what I was looking to do. And I would pitch stories to like the New York Times, different things. And I ran some of the pictures in the What They Were Thinking column. It was just a nice way to start getting work out there. This picture is very important to me because with telling stories, I think it's very easy to do like all of one thing, in the sense to like always go and make pictures that are like funny or overly romantic or might be like sarcastic. And to me, it's important to touch on things, to build a story of pictures that touch on a lot of different moods. So this one being much more like romantic, more sentimental. Here we see some cheerleaders praying before a competition. It was amazing going there because it was just like this explosion of energy. All the time spent like preparing for it, getting ready. And this is a team watching another team perform on stage. After photographing the girls for a while, I wanted to broaden the project and started photographing the natural counterpart, which of course the football players, the guys, for the most part. I love working on personal projects. I mean, it's so important to me because everything, like all my work, like all of that comes from working on these. And I also love the time that's allowed for it. And a lot of that comes from like that going to art school and just like having a semester, a year to like work on stuff and really try to figure it out. So with starting to work on this project, I also started becoming much more interested in like the styling, the costuming, And from starting to do this, I started getting fashion assignments and other editorial stuff. It was really hard for me to make a picture of the actual event. And it's in general with sports. I photograph a lot of sports stuff now, or have over the years, because it's something that's so, I don't know, it's so familiar. And it was something that I photographed a lot and like went back to and like looked at. And this picture became successful just because of the moment that is going on here. And it's something that I constantly look forward now, and it's become much more aware of it when photographing. It's kind of the same thing with this. It's this weird, like, very nice tension in a photograph that's not really sure what's going on, or it's like the moment that came before or the moment that's about to happen. To ruin that, this guy was going over and like getting the ball that was kicked over the fence, and he was bringing it back over for the football game. High school sports are great. There's so much, people give it their all. And this was a Don Bosco team in New Jersey, and they went on to win state this year when I was photographing this. And this player, he played offense and defense and just got like the crap beat out of him. And so at some of the cheerleading competitions down in Daytona. A lot of the things that I photograph, it's very straightforward. I pick an idea, I obsess about it, and then just shoot it until I'm like just completely exhausted with it. And from like one theme to the next, from the cheerleaders to the flight attendants, the bodybuilders, I work on it until I'm just kind of like, it's time to move on to the next thing. And whether that's like a year, 2 years, 3 years, just depending on how busy like personal life is, family life, assignment work. But it's always great to have these projects to work on. And with the cheerleading, there was some of the coaches were telling me that they almost want like the players to go out and like flirt and go out and get all that stuff out of their system before they go and do all the team stuff throughout the year. So at the beach in Daytona, I mean, it's such a beautiful setting, the light. After the competitions and all the awards, everyone would go out onto the beach in the sand and pose and celebrate. So from a new story here. From the cheerleading and the football players, I went on to work on my second project, which was called Most Muscular, and this is at a bodybuilding competition. I was originally assigned this subject matter from Men's Journal magazine to go to Las Vegas and photograph the Mr. Olympia competition. And from going to go and do that, I just was so drawn to how everything was so like over the top. Everything was like so extreme, taken to like such an exaggerated level. So I did that assignment, and then I came back and I started photographing bodybuilding competitions on my own and pitching stories to, made some of these pictures for the New Yorker magazine. And here are some of the trophies. A lot of my pictures also, they touch on different things, sometimes like dealing with stereotypes, groups of people. This picture I just like. Not much to say about it, but and also it's like bodybuilding's been something that's been so heavily photographed, and it's traditionally it's very like such a serious, intense thing, and I love just kind of like interjecting some humor into it and trying to approach something in a different way. And even still, like earlier this month, did a shoot down in Miami photographing a bodybuilder. It's interesting when starting to put out certain subject matters, like photo editors and art directors really identify with it. The working world can be a very, very literal place, which is also, it's great and interesting that way, because that's why I love sharing the personal work and then really enjoying the assignment work that comes in from that, because at this point everything's it's all very closely related. And after photographing something for a while, really wanting to try to look at it in a different way. And after taking more of like the documentary style pictures, just wanted to really try to abstract things and make it much more about the expression. And this is another one of the trophies. Yeah, the trophies were amazing. I feel like I could have like a whole collection of things from over the years of just going and like photographing. Yeah, all these different trophies from jobs. This was at the original, the Mr. Olympia competition. And this one. And this became my second show at Clamp Art. Yeah, back in like 2005. So at the same time of photographing the bodybuilders, I also started on this series, which became about flight attendants. And this was the first picture that I made in the series, and this was on a small commuter flight up to Boston. And on the way back, just kind of like looked up and saw this like the stereotypical call button. And as everyone was like deboarding, my like, assistant and I were like grabbing like the Hasselblad out and the Q flashes and like scrambling and like awkwardly like crouching down in the seat, like trying to photograph this little like call button. It was a fun moment because it was just kind of like, I knew it was gonna like lead to something, the curiosity in something. And this also just kind of naturally presented itself. It's when I started traveling a lot for magazines and was naturally on airlines, and this thing was just around me. And even though we ended up like pitching different stories to try to get access, basically how I was able to photograph this was pitching stories to magazines, travel stories, fashion stories, to help get access, and then yeah, to get out and shoot. And we put together, like me and the editor put together like a giant long list. And a lot of airlines just like wanted nothing to do with us, but some of them were just, they got it, they were into it, and then we're able, that's how the project started. This was in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, AirAsia, and this was at their flight attendant school. This is in Iceland. I love, I mean, this style of people, different hints into their personality are things that really make me interested in making a picture about something. I started this project photographing domestic airlines like Southwest, and I don't know if it's in here, but there's a picture of Hooters airline. And then pretty quickly I wanted to go overseas where it's much more nostalgic and yeah, had a different mood to it. Yeah. So, and this was in Iceland. I just loved the calmness of with the activity going on in the flight attendant school. This is like my rock video picture. I was like, this is amazing. The heels, the hats, the smoke, action. It happens. This is the exhibition, some installation shots at Clamp Art. I showed the pictures in a few different cities, but we started the show here with Brian Clamp. And these were big, like 40 by 40 inch prints. I've always worked between like a 15 by 15, 20 by 20, and 40 by 40 size. And this was the next series I worked on. This was construction. The next few slides, these are examples of different book covers that we played around with. I worked with an art director friend who is the art director of Details magazine for many years. And these were a few different things, and none of these were chosen, but I think it's just nice kind of seeing the process of things until like getting to the final. And this was, I worked on this book with Decode Books, which is a great small publisher out in Seattle. And it was a wonderful process because we were just worked very closely directly with the publisher and worked on like the sequencing, and he would print out. We went through like two small book dummies, and then like a final like full size, just to be able to like sit with it, live with it, flip through it, before actually finally going on to press, along with doing like all the rounds of like the color proofs and stuff. This was some of the layouts that we were playing around with. And I always go on press. It's like a great experience to do, and final stage in the process. I highly recommend it. I mean, most of the color proofing is done kind of like leading up to it with the color, with just the proofs, the back and forth, and making notes and stuff. And probably about like 10% of colors finally like adjusted on press. But it's a nice kind of final thing. This was in China, in Shenzhen, just out of Hong Kong. And they got these are the different plates. The guys had an amazing eye. And it's just kind of like a crazy experience of being on press for like 12, 14, 16 hours straight, taking a break, going back, and everything like building up, and then just seeing the final thing and seeing it come to life is pretty awesome. This is the viewing board. And everything's printed on like the giant sheets, then cut up, and this is the cover. And this was lunch at IKEA. There's a big IKEA right there. My publisher, he goes there every time he goes, and just love, yeah. Yes. So this is all the sheets, how everything's like laid down to dry before it's cut and bound. And this is the beautiful printing plant. I always get sick when I go here. It's like all the ink in the air and just everything. It's yeah, it's a crazy experience. And this was the final book. And a few of the spreads. And similar installation shots. These were smaller prints. I wanted to tell much more of a story on the gallery wall, and just kind of, yeah, I wanted a different experience looking at something smaller in scale. And this was the final. And a few of the photos from it. This was actually kind of the hardest thing to go and photograph, just with all the liability involved. I originally started approaching like the contracting companies, like on-job sites, but there's basically like 3 cooks in the kitchen, the contractors, the architects, and then the money. And in the end, I was like, oh, I should try approaching the architects. And it was just reaching out to a lot of them, but them kind of being more the creative person in the picture. They were the ones that, how I ended up getting access to go and shoot. And it was an interesting place going on. I mean, you think of construction sites that there's all this like stuff, but it was a lot of just kind of like wandering and looking, and like the moments felt very different to me. I mean, each project, it's kind of stylistically, it feels like it changes just very subtly, or yeah. And these, they felt began to feel much more like landscape pictures than previous work had. And booby pictures, and more, the boys on the job sites, boys being boys, and then guns. It's weird. It's like, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like my life is like climaxing in this like photographing vices and all of these like weird things. It's a fun thing being a working photographer and traveling. It's just like every day it's new. For the past week and a half, I've been working on a story for the New York Times Magazine, photographing people in their workplace, photographing during their lunch hour. And they're great, like weird, quirky, weird pictures, and it's wonderful. I mean, like people are like, you're always like clicking and then shooting like right as like the food's about to go into the mouth. And like yesterday at CNBC, the guy's eating like barbecue ribs, but like eating them with chopsticks, and it's like they're all like sitting at computers, and I don't know, I just like, it's kind of like an amazing life being a photographer and getting to go and like always see new things and just these totally random experiences. I mean, half the time it's like, I don't know where I am these days. It's like in the past month, I was like in Illinois, Miami, Oaxaca, like drinking mezcal story for like a week. My driver that I was working with, he was like drinking more than me and my assistant were. We were like, we lived through all of that. And then like San Francisco, LA, it's fun. It's a really fun, like addictive lifestyle and kind of really awesome to be able to go and see all these things. This was a project I worked on about U.S. Marshals. It came about a buddy of mine that I went to high school with. He became a U.S. Marshal in Houston. We reconnected like leading up to our 20-year high school reunion. And I was just like, wow, that's incredible. Sounds amazing. He was like, you know, come check it out. And I was in Houston over the holidays and went down and yeah, I wanted to shoot this. And he put me in touch with their PR department in DC, and I was like, I'm a photographer, I'd love to do a book. You guys game? And they're okay. I think it's kind of amazing photography now. I think it's a really great time for photography. And like people wanting to tell their stories and to be seen and like, yeah, just reality TV and now like social media, like all of this stuff. Like people want the attention, they want to tell their stories. And that's like how things like this were able to go and do. They wanted to share what they do because they just kind of like, well, other government agencies don't like, or people are more familiar with it. So that's kind of how I started doing it with the Marshals. This was a wild thing. This was down, I shot at a bunch of different cities around the country, and this was a trip between, a Texas trip between Brownsville and El Paso for like a week, going to all these different like offices along the border town. And this was a guy, him and his brother, who was actually pictures in here also. They were running to get over the Mexico border, and they caught up with him at this, at like a family member's house. They were waiting for him. Yeah, this is at a training facility. I like the play with the reality on things. It's something that I keep revisiting and revisiting. These kind of like, because I love working in the documentary tradition, but I like when pictures kind of, when you look at it between like the lighting and the moments of not really knowing whether something is real or not real. I like that curiosity that is built. So it was at a flight attendant school. All of my stuff just overlaps, and it's kind of like, well, I'm photographing U.S. Marshals, but then I'm on a plane. This was at a U.S. Marshals training facility in, at LAX. This was one of the first pictures that I took of the series, and this is my buddy Cameron, yeah, who brought it all together. This was the from the previous story of the brother when they were getting arrested. And it was a really, for me, it was a, I don't know, it was a really strange picture to make. It was that personal space. This thing was happening, and it's the very subtle tear, like on his chest, that really became touching. And I always use flash, and I went into the front seat and was like making this picture, and just knew that I couldn't be like popping stuff, and just because this moment that was going on. This was upstate. We did a lot of ride-alongs with the U.S. Marshals, and like my assistant and I, we'd be like in the back seat of the SUV with the tinted windows and with the binoculars ourselves. It was a lot of the time just kind of get very wrapped up in the worlds when taking pictures. Kind of very, because it's kind of like you share so many experiences together with the people that you're photographing. And I like that about it. I feel like tonight even it's coming and like sharing. Most of the time it's just kind of putting out individually, but I think it's kind of like people are the combination of all the stories that they tell. So. And the pink handcuffs. This was in Vegas. And John McAfee. This was an assignment for Wired magazine from going and photographing guys with guns. Then I started getting assignments related to it. I think people are familiar with the story with John. It was like a few years ago. Wired magazine had been doing a profile on him for like 6 months on and off. And right before it runs, they send me down to Belize where he was staying to photograph him and like all his bodyguards and his girlfriends and all this stuff. And that's my point. When I'm working and shooting, it's always these like random places, which is kind of great. And these like different worlds to like have these vignettes into and to experience. And his whole story is like, he's a big tech guy. He developed McAfee Securities, which is on like most websites and stuff. Crazy smart guy, like got in some issues here in the States in the like late 90s, went down to Belize for like 10 years. And when he was down there, then he started getting, I don't know, he's bored, smart, I don't know, whatever, started getting into some trouble with like the government there with like accusations of drugs and the guns and like putting together like a little like police force thing. So the photo editor's like, let's send Brian to go down and hang out. And yeah, I spent like 2 days with him and photographed him with his girlfriends. And it's interesting. I mean, I think about photography a lot, obviously, done it for a long time. And I think what part of it, I'm just kind of like, how did this stuff happen in front of me, or how these things? And I think a lot of it is like, it's a personality thing. I totally wasn't, I like the transition. It's just kind of like, I don't know, disappear in a place. I'm very like unassuming, I'm not too intimidating. It's just kind of like hanging out, I get that. It's just like that time spent. I mean, so much of what I do is traveling. It's like sitting on a plane, sitting on a rental car, you know, wherever it might be. And then it's just like that kind of like, it's cool just, you know, letting things happen. And even though sometimes instigating a little bit, but also seeing things. This was a job, that was some work stuff, just wanting to show from like the personal, like some of the work things. But I love my assignment work. I've always, like, that was always my goal. I always, like going into art school, I was like, I want to be a magazine photographer. I want to do that. And at the time, I didn't really realize. It was like the lifestyle that it entailed, the travel, like all that. But it's a lot of fun. It's a really good time, and yeah. Yeah, so this was for ESPN. This was a college football game, LSU. It was a cool thing they did for a while. It was called One Day, One Game, and they would get like a dozen photographers, a dozen writers, everybody team up and like just scour. And they were funny, people would you shoot whatever you want, basically. And some people would go and whatever, I don't know, do locker room things, do crowd things. They would kind of make fun of me afterwards because they would always be like, Brian would go to the cheerleaders and to like the crazy tailgating. It's like I would shoot nothing else, but like lots of that. So, yeah. And, you know, being a photographer, I honestly believe like reality is the best. It's like you can never make it up as amazing as you can just like go and find it and see it. Yeah, there's just kind of something simple and nice about that. Yeah, and this, I mean, I love the assignments that I get. It's kind of like stuff that I would just love to go and shoot anyhow. Yeah. And some more, this was a different assignment, but some more football. love it. People are amazing. I also love, like, one thing with, like, thinking about photography, and doing it, it's kind of like in thinking about, like, personality and, like, how things come together. I really realized, like, oh, hold on, I feel like I should explain these. This was a shoot for Details magazine. This story was called Frat Boys, and I don't feel they weren't real frat boys, but it was a bar on Avenue A called the Boys Room, and it was frat boy themed, and I just loved the whitey tidies and, like, yeah, all the boners and, like, all that stuff. It was everywhere. Yeah, my assistant, he was like, I thought they were trying to steal my wallet, like, because it's crowded. It's like a crowded place. I was like, dude, they're just grabbing your ass. And yeah, I just love to be along for the ride. It's kind of pretty great. Wow, I forgot what I was going to say before. Oh yeah, Pabst Blue Ribbon, attention span. And this is the last one. Let's see what's next. Well, this one kind of fits what I was going to say. But my process of, like, taking pictures, I just was thinking about it. It's totally fits, like, my personality, and I realize I have, like, total OCD. Like, everything much, like, I see, like, things happening, and I must, like, formally try to make it, like, super clean and to organize it. And then it's like I want to mess it up again, just a little bit, when it, like, something happens or that makes it that moment, that picture. So this was my first story for National Geographic. This was 2 years ago. This was about Americans' obsession with beef, and I photographed it all in the state of Texas. It was great to go back and spend, like, 3 months on and off between here in New York and Texas and photographing something of, like, where I came from. This story, it came about kind of through my Instagram feed. I live in Brooklyn. I love barbecue. I love smoking barbecue. I love eating barbecue. I love all of it. I love throwing barbecues. I take lots of barbecue pictures. The editors were somewhat familiar with my work. I had applied to, like, some grants. I didn't get any of them, but yeah, one of the editors reached out and were like, we're thinking of this story for you. And I was like, amazing. And I was like, I'm from Texas. I love barbecue. So they sent me on, like, my barbecue my meat adventure. I went all around the state. This was up in the Panhandle. Went to these old ranches where they, like, still go out to the pasture and, like, brand out there. It was all from farm to table. Butchers. I'll show the pictures. Butchers, which was amazing. This was, like, our second day in Texas, up in Lubbock, and we went to this very, like, artisan butcher. And within, like, 20 minutes, 2 guys had killed the cow, cut it in half, skinned it, and, like, put it in a fridge and hung it up. And it was just kind of amazing to see firsthand. When all this is going on, there's always a health inspector there. And like expected, this is actually the head off to the right. And they're, like, inspecting every cow for, like, disease and stuff. And the butchers were like, is this, like, turning you off beef? I'm like, no way, this is kind of, like, amazing. Yeah. And barbecue restaurants, I love how, like, carnivorous this whole, like, thing feels. It feels, yeah, very animalistic. Lots of eating. This was at the Big Texan eating competition. I love that being uncomfortabably close to people all the time. It's interesting, like, going and shooting, it's like I'm so used to, like, with photographing all the time, like, I get this thing where I just, like, when I'm not working, I'm just kind of, like, looking at people, and if they, like, catch me, like, looking, it feels like it should be natural, but there's no, like, camera, or then it just feels creepy. And the whole obsession and over the top and beef. Yeah, it was an amazing experience being out at this ranch for like a week. National Geographic, it's such a unique thing, so different than other publications just with the amount of time and just kind of like delving into it. It's a very thorough, sometimes overly thorough process in a really great way. This was another story I did for National Geographic. This was earlier this year about the science of taste. Yeah, I do a lot of food-related things also. This was at a taste lab in Philadelphia where they stain the tongue blue and count the taste buds to determine whether someone's a super taster. Apparently, I'm a non-taster. Most of us are non-tasters. Sorry. But yeah, it's based on like 3/4 of the population are non-tasters. But it's more like I love eating hot sauces and I don't know, all these random things that come from it. This was in Copenhagen. And something different. This is a current series that I'm working on called Hip Hop Honeys, Video Vixens. The stuff that I photograph, it's kind of self-explanatory. This came about a photo editor that I work with in Italy. We were at this photo festival, and she had seen this BBC documentary about video vixens, and she was like, Brian, the subject's amazing. You would love this, just the people, the styling, and all that stuff. And I would normally I have no deep reason why I go and shoot things sometimes. I mean, during this time I was getting a divorce. Life was crazy. I'm like, this sounds amazing to hang out on the set of a hip hop videos and be around all of this and be like, wow, I'm here shooting this. So that's how this started. But I love it. I think it's, I don't know. I was gonna tell, I'm trying to I didn't want to, it's self-censor. Anyhow, yeah, it's been a fun thing to shoot. I'm starting to work with New York Magazine published a small piece. I'm starting to work with a writer there and also possibly an illustrator to do something that's maybe not totally about photos, but something outside of just maybe a straightforward photo book. I'm trying to figure that out now. But this I worked through a casting director, and it's everything from kind of B-level stuff to Jay-Z videos, Busta Rhymes, and it's great. It's different levels of casting, and some it's wonderful when it's super low budget and this, in some hotel room that they didn't even pay for a location. We've been chased out of locations, but it's nice to be all the different situations. It's I'm one of those people I don't really overthink things. I just do it and do it and do it and do it and do it. And I like that about it. I think it's a fun exploration. The world of selfies. She does it so well. And I also like making these kind of this felt like a new picture to me. Just very ambiguous moments that didn't really talk about anything, but just kind of created a curiosity. I love all the attitude. I mean, the models, they're just owning it. I think it's pretty awesome. And from this, I get advertising work to do oh gosh, what was it? SoCo, Southern Comfort, thanks. This is Adrian, everyone. We've worked together forever. We were working today, I dragged her along, so here we are. Booty. Smoking. My vices everywhere. The guns isn't a vice. money. I love it. Everything's fake. It's this like interesting thing of like fake guns, fake money, fake booty, even though no one would admit it. And yes, so this is the last little series that I brought. This was an assignment, guys. This is what I do for work these days. This is a job for Boston Magazine. This I shot in December. Amazing way to end the year. They were like, we want to send you to Jamaica to photograph at this hedonism resort. I'm like, okay, sounds great. So yeah, basically we saw everything. To put it into perspective, at the resort there was a all-nude side and then a prude side. And the prude side was pretty much all naked also. So yeah, we saw there, well, I'll show some of the pictures. Yeah, but it's great. I mean, these people were there. It was fun. They were there, you know, enjoying themselves. Some people were like swingers, nudists. Some people just wanted to go and watch. That's cool too. But I loved it. It was nice. It was wonderful being there. It was kind of like Austin Powers, like creating a little like fig leaf that like went around like all the body parts. Because like seeing these things, there's so many pictures that have been made of like swingers or like sex clubs, and it's like, it's the ambiguity and the curiosity, I think, that makes it really nice. It makes you want to like keep looking at the photos instead of something that's like, yeah. So. This is the last one. It's a crazy ride, it always is. There were foam parties, running around naked. It's great. Mezcal adventures in Mexico. It's a good time. So thanks for listening to my rant, guys. I'm happy to answer questions.
I was just curious about your choice of using a square photograph in work. How did you arrive at that? And just curious about it.
Right. I love the formality of the square. I started shooting Hasselblad back in like the late 90s. And it just, it's also going like, I mean, I grew up like loving the photographs of like traditional documentary photographers like Eugene Smith, Jill Perez, Robert Frank, like that whole like black and white storytelling thing. And it came to a point like, I mean, that's even, actually it's a good point to make. That's even like what I was doing when I was in school. It's like I went and photographed like heroin use in the South Bronx, and like a friend that was a drag queen and all this, and it was all like 35 millimeter black and white, like very reportage. And then I got this grant to go to India and work on this story about child labor. And then just after doing it, I went through like some personal stuff. I was like, I want to find something that feels more like my own. And I started shooting with the Hasselblad and introducing the Q flashes, and just to kind of like really heighten the moment. Between like the use of color, the flash, the moments, and the square, it just felt right. It's just like the formality of it and stuff. It was different than I had been seeing, and just a combination of the different elements. It just felt more like my own. And physically, I loved the physicality of like holding a Hasselblad. I would mount like a 90-degree prism and cut off like this flash bracket and just be able to like shoot in just the way that the square felt. And then came Instagram. Yeah, that's kind of the process. Also, I mean, with starting to shoot color, I like just the detail in the medium format, just kind of dealing with that. Now I shoot Nikon. Like D3X, D800, D810, still with Q flashes and stuff, and sometimes mixed with other like speed lights or pro photos, different things. But why I started shooting that was just that it does like the 4:5 sensor crop and the viewfinder crop, and for me it was a close easy transition from film into digital. And I'm a better photographer. The responsiveness of like how tight the TTL is and the autofocus and the auto exposure, it's just like I can, shoot more, play around more, look for other moments, do things. It's just the spontaneity, because so much of my pictures is just about reacting in a situation. And just, it works. If it didn't, I wouldn't be doing it. So, guys, I'm happy to answer like technical things also. I realized I didn't really touch on that very much, or or any sort of like work stuff also. I'm sure that's good things.
So you've done both advertising and editorial work. What are some of the major differences for you personally and professionally?
Okay. Everybody, this is my girlfriend, Diane. She came in late. Editorial and advertising. It's both great. I do one for a while, and then it's fun to run off and do another one. They're different experiences. Editorial, it's great just running around with like my assistant and like that relationship and just kind of like going and exploring. And then it's fun when there's like budgets and the producers just like making everything happening. And they're different experiences, and it's fun doing both. I couldn't, I couldn't always do advertising. I go a little crazy. And editorial, it's like it's the go, 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 go. You kind of like, run out of steam at some point also. So it's a nice combo.
To build on that question, actually, do you have a situation where, let's say with the flight attendants, it comes back as an advertising job? Does somebody say, hey, you did a great job with your book, can you shoot our next advertising campaign?
Yeah, it's happened twice, which is great. I did some stuff for Air New Zealand a few years ago, and especially with the flight attendants, with something being such a unique subject matter. A lot of times clients are very literal. They need to see to make that connection of like, and I get it. It's like they have to pitch it to a client. The client needs to see what they're gonna get, type of a thing. I did a bunch of Delta stuff last year for a while, and it was great. It's a lot of it comes very directly related, like some of to get back to the hedonism thing. I did a story for Men's Journal like last spring, and it was photographing this big cruise ship, and then it was all these like hot tub parties and stuff. And then then the editor, like, that stuff comes out, and I get a call like right away to do that. I mean, it's a good thing. It's a very simple thing to say, but it's very much like what you put out is what you'll get called to do. Because sometimes I know, like, coming from being like to making that transition to working, and if you make the decision to work like commercially, it's kind of like, oh, well, I want to work and I want to get work, or I just want to be busy working. But it's like, that's why I've always loved doing like the shows and that balance, that work-personal balance, because that's kind of where it all comes from, and put out what you want in return. So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about gaining access specifically in the beginning of your career? Like, you said that you would like pitch stories to places, but can you just touch on that a little bit more, please?
Sure. I mean, when I was, for instance, like when I started working on the cheerleading story, I reached out to PR departments. There's basically like two national big cheerleading organizations, and I would straightforward honesty. Like, hey, I'm a student. I've been taking some pictures for the Village Voice. Sent them like copies of a few tear sheets, and then they just gave me a press pass. I think it's just kind of like it's the same thing when I like reaching out to like the marshal's office. It's kind of like just being honest and straightforward and direct. It's like, I want to do a book. I if we work on this and it's great, then that's what it, will become. So I think it's just kind of real. Yeah, I guess that simply that. It's an interesting thing though, being on assignment, especially editorially, because a lot of the times like access somewhat has to be figured out, and it's kind of like being a photographer. It's like part psychologist and just like meeting like totally different people, and then trying to figure out how to like how to produce stuff. And that's why something like I realized, like, I mean, you guys, I'm sure you guys are great photographers. Why I get a call is that I've been doing it for a while. It's pretty simple that way. Like editors call because they know I can go somewhere, and like recently did a job in Japan, in Nagasaki, and it was to photograph this hotel that's run entirely by robots. But it's like, yeah, it costs money to get there. It's kind of like it can be expensive. They're flying myself and an assistant, going through airports, and like the local airport wasn't going to let the batteries go on the plane. This has been like an issue like forever, or it pops up every so often. But getting to a place, crazy jet lag, like feeling weird, like then like how do you interact with people and relate and be able to like produce? It's fun, it's great, and it's just nice. I mean, all of these, like I know, like wow, when I'm in this thing, I'm like, how do I prepare myself? Just get my head right, type of a thing, and like be on and and then produce pictures. So, yeah.
Wondering if you have any long-term projects you're working on, professionally and personally, either.
Currently working on the hip hop series. It's been in the works for 3 years now. It's a little longer than I normally work on stuff. I'm trying to complete that this year. It's just like the last like 2 years literally have been like slammed with assignment work. Like last year it was like 6 months for National Geographic, like flying all over the world, literally, everywhere. One story came out, the next one's coming out in their March issue about food waste. So I always, it's time to complete that soon, is my goal, and then kind of see what's next. A lot of times things, I believe they kind of present themselves, just interests and transition from one thing to the next. So, we'll see.
That's why I took the mic. I'm interested in, you mentioned Instagram, and how do you use it? Use it for exploration, promotion, behind the scenes? What do you do with Instagram?
I'm trying to figure that out also, completely. A friend of mine that I went to art school with, I met in San Francisco last week, and she's one of like the photo editors at Instagram now, and we had dinner, and I was like trying to drill her for everything. I was just like, tell me, what's the answer? I think it's great. I love these days, like how much people are everyone's looking at pictures, everyone's taking pictures. It's kind of amazing. Everyone can like put pictures out there in the world. Between Instagram, between like, self-published books. I mean, it's all like, I think it's a really awesome time for photography. Instagram, it's promotion. It's that balance of like wanting to show like works, like professional pictures, and then to personalize a little bit with like family stuff, and then also to always show traveling. Like to me, that's kind of like a big thing. Like clients, if they're like, because everyone's looking at it, it's like people see like, wow, Brian hasn't gotten off a plane in a while, and that just perpetuates itself. It's something that just like, they see the work, posting the new work, sharing it. National Geographic's great. It's good and it's kind of annoying, but it's cool that they put the platform out there. They give all like photographers like the login information, and they want people to like post from the field when they're shooting. And now I'm doing like posting stuff leading up to like the next story coming out. It's in the March issue, and I think it's to have fun with it ultimately. So, but I think it's also become kind of a platform within its own, in the sense that like I come from a generation of like loving photo books and like seeing pictures on a gallery wall, but it's kind of like it's its own like thing unto itself, which I think is, yeah, another outlet.
Hi, could you share your thinking about lighting and just your approach when you're setting up a shot?
Sure.
To lighting.
I use quantum Q flashes. I love them. They're so small and portable. Run around everywhere with them. And I originally started using them because they were strong enough to overpower daylight at like a very a closer distance, at like a 5 to 8 foot type of a thing. In more recent years, I've switched to their newer models. That's all like TTL, and I have one on camera. My assistant has one off camera, and I'm always like trying to figure out like lighting that makes sense with the current subject matter or where I want to change it for myself. Like more recently, some of the pictures were like, I would be like shooting a subject, and then my assistant would be holding a second Q flash at like a 90-degree angle to subject to create more of like a hair light and these kind of like cross lights type of a thing. And now I'm kind of bringing everything kind of like closer to camera below to kind of like blow things out. And I love how portable they are. And I also like to be able to create different lighting moods very quickly, because sometimes like, especially like we were talking before about starting about like, oh, scouting office locations before like going and working on this Times job. And I show up and shoot. It's like what I do all the time. So it's kind of like having these like things depending on the location and the mood that I want to create and all that type of stuff. I also work with like pro photo, like 6Bs, like off camera, and like speed light sometime, like close to camera on telephoto, different stuff like that. But I think also when building like a story of pictures, it's nice to be able to mix it up so everything doesn't have the same tone, and it's just with moving the lighting around, yeah, enables that. So, yeah.
What was your experience at SVA like, and how does your work differ now from then? And did you ever experiment in the studio and stuff like that either?
I mentioned some of it before, but yeah, I mean, I went from wanting like the black and white 35 type of a thing, style of like the traditional like journalist documentary photographer. And I think it's nice to realize that, because it's kind of like when I was in school, I was just so like, this is me, this is what I wanted to do. And it's nice to kind of like allow things to change. And yeah, I'm always curious about that. Even though I think I change things very subtly, to me, that feels nice with trying different stuff. I mean, I shoot in studios, I do different things. Yeah, I deal with like productions, like big productions. What I love doing is running around with like one assistant. Like that always just feels good. It feels good when you're like snapping on the battery pack and like running around and jet lagged and just kind of having fun with it. So, yeah.
Shooting other people, did you ever get a response from people that saw their image, if it was negative or positive?
I want to repeat that question.
Mm-hmm. Oh, can you repeat it, please? Oh, can I repeat it? Why'd you put me on the spot like that? Do I get negative or positive responses from people when I photograph them? That's your question, right? Sure, both. Yeah. I mean, negative, I don't know how much, but I mean, people like being photographed. I ask people. I never shoot somebody that doesn't like say yes to having their picture taken. It doesn't feel right. I wouldn't appreciate that of someone else, but it's plus I like being close to what I'm shooting, close to people, up in people's business, like people eating lunches above keyboards and like right there, like yeah, that feels good. I mean, I'm trying to think of other, yeah.
I want to add something to that. Just to continue with that question, as long as you're here with us, with the marshals, I mean, you're talking about a government agency, you're talking about law enforcement. Were there a lot of lawyers involved, or were there different restrictions put on you as to what the images should look like, or what kind of images you could actually use for the book?
No, not in deciding like any sort of aesthetic or editing choice like that. There were legal things that they set forth in the beginning that I was very aware of. I wasn't able to use some of the pictures because of that, but it's like a privacy thing of being in people's homes. I mean, they're like, you're not allowed to enter like premises when I'm there. The reality of it is all this like stuff is going on, and the marshals on the ground there are just like, come shoot all this. So then we go in, and yeah, I mean, there's some nice photos that we're able to use, but I get it. I mean, it's fair. I didn't have consent, so yeah. Yeah.
When you're given an assignment, are you told where to go, or do you choose where to go?
Yeah, I mean, they call, they book my flights, book the travel. Yeah, I mean, normally you're there to cover a specific thing, so you go and do that. Yeah, what, you're gonna get a call and not go do what you're told to do?
Kind of like with the meat one, you know.
Oh, okay.
It could be, you know, would it be your choice, or do they send you
Right.
somewhere specific? Like with different kind of assignments that you get.
Yeah. I was stuck in the head of like what I've been doing for the past week and a half. Yeah, I mean, in that case, it works differently. I mean, National Geographic's a little bit of an exception in that way. Like, they kind of like, for the most part, kind of like put you out in the field, like send you somewhere with some contacts, and then it's kind of going and meeting people and kind of figuring it out that way, building a story. So, but I mean, there's like with that magazine, then there's meetings in DC and there's discussions. It's kind of, talk about, you know, the whole editing process, why one picture is chosen from another is a conversation. It's a big thing. Yeah, I mean, it's working within the confines of the subject matter of the assignment, whether how broad or specific that might be. Yeah.
So, Brian, thank you so much, and also thank you in particular for making a hiatus in your shooting job so you could be here with us tonight.
Oh, yeah,
I
it's
know
my
you had to
pleasure.
make a special
It's fun to
parenthesis
come
for
in.
that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm working on these, and I also love the time that's allowed for it, and a lot of that comes from like that going to art school and just like having a semester, a year to like work on stuff and really try to figure it out. So with starting to work on this project, I also started becoming much more interested in like the styling, the costuming. And from starting to do this, I started getting fashion assignments and other editorial stuff. It was really hard for me to make a picture of the actual event. And it's in general with sports. I photograph a lot of sports stuff now, or have over the years, because it's something that's so, I don't know, it's so familiar. And it was something that I photographed a lot and like went back to and like looked at. And this picture became successful just because of the moment that is going on here. And it's something that I constantly look forward now, and it's become much more aware of it when photographing. It's kind of the same thing with this. It's this weird, like, very nice tension in a photograph that's not really sure what's going on, or it's like the moment that came before or the moment that's about to happen to ruin that. This guy was going over and like getting the ball that was kicked over the fence, and he was bringing it back over for the football game. High school sports are great. There's so much, people give it their all. And this was a Don Bosco team in New Jersey, and they went on to win state this year when I was photographing this. And this player, he played offense and defense and just got like the crap beat out of him. And so at some of the cheerleading competitions down in Daytona. A lot of the things that I photograph, it's very straightforward. I pick an idea, I obsess about it, and then just shoot it until I'm like just completely exhausted with it. It's like bodybuilding's been something that's been so heavily photographed, and traditionally it's very like such a serious, intense thing, and I love just kind of like interjecting some humor into it and trying to approach something in a different way. And even still, like earlier this month, did a shoot down in Miami photographing a bodybuilder. It's interesting when starting to put out certain subject matters, like photo editors and art directors really identify with it. The working world can be a very, very literal place, which is also, it's great and interesting that way because that's why I love sharing the personal work and then really enjoying the assignment work that comes in from that, because at this point it's all very closely related. And after photographing something for a while, really wanting to try to look at it in a different way, and after taking more of like the documentary style pictures, just wanted to really try to abstract things and make it much more about the expression. And this is another one of the trophies. Yeah, the trophies were amazing. I feel like I could have like a whole collection of things from over the years of just going and like photographing. Yeah, all these different trophies from jobs. This was at the original, the Mr. Olympia competition. And this one. And this became my second show at Clamp Art. Yeah, back in like 2005. So at the same time of photographing the bodybuilders, I also started on this series, which became about flight attendants. And this was the first picture that I made, and from like one theme to the next, from the cheerleaders to the flight attendants, the bodybuilders, I work on it until I'm just kind of like, it's time to move on to the next thing. And whether that's like a year, 2 years, 3 years, just depending on how busy like personal life is, family life, assignment work. But it's always great to have these projects to work on. And with the cheerleading, there was some of the coaches were telling me that they almost want like the players to go out and like flirt and go out and get all that stuff out of their system before they go and do all the team stuff throughout the year. So at the beach in Daytona, I mean, it's such a beautiful setting, the light. After the competitions and all the awards, everyone would go out onto the beach in the sand and pose and celebrate. So from a new story here. From the cheerleading and the football players, I went on to work on my second project, which was called Most Muscular, and this is at a bodybuilding competition. I was originally assigned this subject matter from Men's Journal magazine to go to Las Vegas and photograph the Mr. Olympia competition. And from going to go and do that, I just was so drawn to how everything was so like over the top. Everything was like so extreme, taken to like such an exaggerated level, So I did that assignment, and then I came back and I started photographing bodybuilding competitions on my own and pitching stories to, made some of these pictures for the New Yorker magazine. And here are some of the trophies. A lot of my pictures also, they touch on different things, sometimes like dealing with stereotypes, groups of people. This picture I just like. Not much to say about it, but and also being on the football field again. How I originally started this project was I saw the movie Bring It On. I know we've all seen it. Amazing film. I saw it, and afterwards I was like, I need to go to these cheerleading competitions. My sisters were cheerleaders in high school. They had been to these big competitions. I was like, I still want to go and photograph this and check it out. So I originally started going and would just get in the car and like drive down to Florida, Daytona, Orlando. And this is also the time where I started working for magazines. And I would like call photo editors or, well, email people and tell them what I was looking to do. And I would pitch stories to like the New York Times, different things. And I ran some of the pictures in the What They Were Thinking column. It was just a nice way to start getting work out there. This picture is very important to me because with telling stories, I think it's very easy to do like all of one thing, in the sense to like always go and make pictures that are like funny or overly romantic or might be like sarcastic. And to me, it's important to touch on things, to build a story of pictures that touch on a lot of different moods. So this one being much more like romantic, more sentimental. Here we see some cheerleaders praying before a competition. It was amazing going there because it was just like this explosion of energy. All the time spent like preparing for it, getting ready. And this is a team watching another team perform on stage. After photographing the girls for a while, I wanted to broaden the project and started photographing the natural counterpart, which of course the football players, the guys, for the most part. I love working on personal projects. I mean, it's so important to me because everything, like all my work, like all of that comes from.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have photographer and SVA alum Brian Finke as tonight's guest speaker. Originally from Texas, Brian is currently based in New York, where he is represented by Clamp Art Gallery. To date, he has published 4 amazing monographs: 2468 American Cheerleaders and Football Players, Umbrage; Flight Attendants Powerhouse Books; Construction Decode Books; and most recently, U.S. Marshals, also from Powerhouse. Among others, his work is in the permanent collections of the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, Worcester Art Museum, St. Louis Art Museum, Akron Art Museum, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Kyosato Museum of Photographic Arts, and the Alexia Foundation for World Peace. So please help me give Brian a warm welcome to our lecture series.
Thanks, man.
Welcome.
Thanks. Hello, I'm Brian. I'm a photographer. Yeah, it's great coming back. I went to SVA and love the opportunity to come back and share stories. I shoot for magazines all the time. I've published books, do gallery exhibitions, and I brought pictures from a few different series here along with some work stuff, and I'll just kind of like start showing this and ramble off and tell you guys a bunch of stories and kind of like what it's like working after art school and all that good stuff. So this was the first project that I worked on that became my first book. I started this after SVA. I'm from Texas. My sisters were cheerleaders. I was like the newspaper yearbook photographer. And it kind of felt like full circle coming back and like